Hey folks, so today we're going to talk about how to get an AI to get really good at art. As a subset of that, how to create the best personal art experience for people. These are obviously the central pillars, the central questions that we grapple with at TechOviz. I've spent many a countless nights thinking about this, and there are so many approaches that we could try out, that we've been trying out, some with some amount of success, some that have moved the needle marginally, some that have not panned out as we would have expected, many approaches that we can't quite try out at the moment because you need to work at the model level that we can't being capital constrained, but we hopefully will be able to do that soon. But there's a frontier, right? AI, art, and creativity. There's just so many approaches that we can try out, and one of the most fun aspects of building this is the experimental nature of it, because you're doing things that we are kind of operating at the frontier of creativity. So lots of exciting, fun stuff, and again, lots of stuff as you'll see in this conversation that we are very excited to try out in the near future. But because there's so many approaches, this could get to be like a 5 hour, 10 hour conversation. And I'm sure that for most of our listeners, they don't want to sit through a 5 hour conversation on how to get an AI to get really good at art. So we're going to try to keep it contained. We'll try to wrap it up within 10 minutes, just hitting the major points. So with that, let's start right into it. Now, the first thing to say about this is the models, straight off the box, are pretty good at art. And you already see that, right? They're better than 90% of people when it comes to art. I'd say 96%, 97% already, probably more. In terms of the execution, right, they're better than like most people. But even in terms of the actual ideation, the way I think about art is you got the actual idea, right? What are the different elements, what are the different emotions that you're evoking, what are the motives that you're going to be using, the composition, the representations that you're going to use for the emotions, for the objects, etc. And then there's the actual execution. For a human painter, for a human artist, that'd be actually putting the brush on the canvas. For an AI, for a computer program, that'd be just creating the pixels in that space, right? So that's the boring part. That's the part that's been automated. But the AI is really good at even at the actual ideation, actual conception part of things. And the models, like, they've learned art theory, they've learned so much, they've picked all of these different things, so they can then use, and these models are, the state-of-the-art models are multimodal, so they're damn good. I'd say probably better than like 96% of people, if I dare say that. And that might offend a lot of people. But the thing about where we are right now in the cycle, now I don't want to use the word cycle, but we're in this journey, is we've got to, this is a separate point, but we've got to separate our identities and our self-worth from what we can do and what we can bring to the world uniquely, right? Just because an AI can beat you at chess doesn't mean that your chess endeavors and your chess games become any less meaningful, right? And same should be the case for art. Just because an AI can create art doesn't mean that the art is all about what it does for you, what it does to you, how does it move you, how does it make you think, and how does it make you feel, and all of that. So we've got to redefine our relationships. We've got to change our relationships to a lot of these different things, right? Like, how do we think about art, and how do we think about and a lot of people are not open to that, which is why we've been seeing this backlash, and we've been seeing this anger and this wrath and all of that. And I talked about that. I'm not going to rehash the points, but just wanted to make a quick note on that. Now, so that's a model layer. You already get to like 96, 97%, but where's the alpha, right? If that is all we were doing, then there's no point. Sure, we've got the hardware, but again, people could easily build an app connected to ChatGPT. So where's the alpha? What really are we trying to build over here, right? Like, we want to build the ultimate art and storytelling platform. So you got to get really good at art. Like, the ultimate goal, North Star, is to get the best at art. Now, one of the things that we've done, which is pretty accessible for us, is use a system card and a memory layer. So these are the magic sauces kind of that have allowed us to get from 96, 95, 94% to like 99%. Right, so what is a system card? A system card is basically a long set of instructions that should go to that model, whatever model you're using. It's like the intermediary layer between that model, whatever models you're using actually, because we tend to use a bunch of different models, and between your applications of Vizzy, right? And so every query is routed through the system card. And what the system card does, so let me actually real quick tell you about the system card itself before we talk about what it does. So it's a long list of instructions, heuristics, tips, tricks, little things, notes and art theory, notes from the best art lectures, from the best artists, how to think about it, right? What different things are implicit knowledge, which you need to make explicit, obviously at the level of the system card. So ours has become pretty long now. We've got, I think, 80 pages long. Recently I added a few more pages, a few more notes, and again, these are things that you want to augment to the model, right? Because these are general purpose models. These are not art models. Even the image models, they're not optimized for the purpose of art creation. So that moves the needle substantially. And the second part of what we've done, which has made the biggest difference, and which is what we were counting on making the biggest difference, is the memory layer. So art, these models straight off the bat, like they're general models, right? Like they've got no intuition of who you are as a person. So this is also what gets us to how to create the best personal art experience. So we've got this Vizzy, which is your interface, which is your art companion, creative companion, your creative muse, your home companion, different words that we tend to throw around. Essentially, Vizzy is this AI that is the AI between everything else that happens in the backend and what you want to create, right? So engages with you in the first instance. There's an onboarding session. It asks you about your life, your lifestyle, your patterns, your goals, your values, your fears, your anxieties, your hopes, your dreams. Creates I wouldn't say deep model, but creates a decent model of who you are as a person. And over time, with its interactions with you, it refines its model, adds more and more detail. The memory layer only grows with more interaction. Where exactly do these interactions come from? From your own usage of the platform itself. So if you're using Green Visualizer, if you're using Personal Painter, you're using all of these features, again, adds the information, right? So let's say that you're having a chat with Vizzy about some art that you want to create right now, because let's say it's Valentine's Day, so let's use that example. You are dumped by your girlfriend, and you've got this gaping hole in your heart, and you're like, okay, I need to transmute this pain into art, right? And so you're like, okay, Vizzy, so my girlfriend dumped me today, and I'm like, oh gosh, I can't see, I can't deal with the world. What do I do? So, Vizzy has a chat with you. Not speaking from experience, by the way. Vizzy has a chat with you, understands, what you're going through, how it also understands the motives, the themes that appeal to you, and picks up these little details. And over time, it adds it to the memory vault. So you don't have to repeat stuff over and over again. And so memory layers has made like really good, like the biggest impact, right? Because that is what personalizes the platform for you. Because there are themes and representations and motifs that are universal in nature, and there are themes and motifs and representations and colors and emotions and states that are personal to you. And the intent of Vizzy with the memory layer architecture is to build up the latter so that we can create the best personal experience. Then the next step, we already start working on this, is connecting it to different data points. So one could be your journals. If you are someone who does do a lot of journaling, as I do, I'll stop doing that for the last 6 months in the time that I needed the most. So quite ironic, but I am a big journaler in general, and lots of people are. So if you connect to your journal, it again has a significant insight into your days and your life and your emotions and all of that, without you having to, repeat that in chats and all of that. So that becomes a significant data point that can again, contextualize art for you, contextualize stories for you, contextualize even curation for you. Because it's not just about creation, it's also about, though curation becomes less important in the world of creation. Curation is, that's actually I hadn't really put it that way until now, but it just appears to me that curation, the reason recommendation engines were like the big thing for all these years, And even when I started building Elinity and DecoViz, actually forget about Elinity, DecoViz, like the big thing that we were building was like the best art curation, like partially, right? Like it still had some curation capabilities, but like the curation engine was like the big piece of it. And now, like it's not even a big part of it, because if you can add creative capabilities, like you don't, like most art in the world then becomes subpar for you. Simple as that. And you can still, we'll still have the curation capabilities. There's still value in having, engaging with human art. And even the old art, a lot of which is supposed to be iconic because of its historical value rather than, some deep emotions or anything of that sort. But my point is that in the world of creation, curation becomes less important. And I say that I say that because of the amount of time I spent on creating curation engines. Like that was my obsession, like my technical obsession, like my pet project for like 5 years. I just realized that the work that I've done in the last 12 months has all made that previous work, obsolete in many ways. Not completely, again, obviously nuance matters, and we'll always still consume things that are not hyper optimized for us, simply because there's a lot more that we'll still get out of those. But I think the world is radically changing, right? I mean, again, written about this recently, but in a world where you can create, let's say 2100, where real-time movies can be created for you at a cost of 50 cents a movie, right? Or free, right? Forget about 50 cents, functionally free. Would you care about watching movies made for the general public? You probably wouldn't, but some people would. That's a separate discussion, right? Like that's that goes into so many rabbit holes that I want to get into in this conversation. We already crossed 12 minutes. I was supposed to wrap it in 10 minutes, so we're already way over time, and we're on through even half of the very high level notes. So let's keep it contained. Let's keep it focused. So yeah, connecting it to peripherals, connecting it to sensors like temperatures and weather and smartwatch. So being able to access your mood, connecting it to non-invasive BCI. So again, we can pick up patterns. How do you feel, etc., etc. Connecting it to mood rings and stuff like that. That can get you to another level of greater quality contextual art. And this is now we do get to the model levels, right? Like how do you actually work with the models themselves? Again, this is not something that we've done. We simply didn't have the resources. We all have started putting some pieces in place at the level of fine tuning, but again, it's going to take us some time to be able to get the results because it is not super expensive. But okay, so before we talk about the cost, what do you do beyond this level? How did you get from all of these things I mentioned? They can get you to 99.99%. But for us, we want to get to 99.99999% tile, right? Better than any human artist. Like we want to put a Van Gogh, we want to put a Pablo Picasso in every single home. Blasphemous, right? I know. Hear me out. So actually, since I mentioned this, I also want to talk about something else. So we tend to think of we tend to put great artists, great physicists, who else? Philosophers, obviously. Who else? Pretty much those three categories on the pedestal, right? Like that's what we do. But when you look at the lives of a lot of these great men and women, but for the most part men, you realize that they were tortured souls. They were not good humans. They were great at what they did, but they were not good humans. Right, that is a contradiction that we've seen throughout human history. So this is nothing new, nothing newsflash. But I was doing a deep history into this, watching lots of documentaries and going through lots of essays about this yesterday. And there are some names, I already had an inkling of this, which is why I went into this rabbit hole in the first place. Up until now, especially for some of the greatest minds of our times, like some of the greatest philosophers, were extremely sexist. Some of them were racist, some of them were actual Nazis, or Nazi primitives. Some artists, they were again, absolute scums of the earth in terms of being in terms of their humanity, though they're creative, the richness of the fertility of their creativity, that would make us think that these are aliens, and they were in that regard. But again, these are dimensions that are completely decoupled, which is what gets me to this point that I realized yesterday. For the first time in human history, it's what we're trying to build over here, right? Like if we can build the ultimate AI artist, forget about AI, like it doesn't matter, but if we can build the ultimate art and intelligence. Oh, okay, so that's actually a good term, right? AI, art intelligence. If we can build the ultimate art intelligence, then we could finally decouple human creative genius from what usually it entails, right? Being tortured mentally, and it's almost like up until now, this had to be a precondition. Like if you want to be a great artist, you had to look at the world differently. And for all sorts of reasons, looking at the world differently means that you also reject a lot of the things which are tried and tested for a good life, for being a good person, right? Like being kind to the people in your life, listening to people, etc. So again, this is not, me canceling people or morality bashing. I've got no time for all of that nonsense. But what I am saying is that up until now, historically, like the greatest of, again, I was reading an article on The Guardian today about this artist. I didn't even find her works any interesting at all, like really boring, really self-obsessed, vapid, like this person's just stuck in their own head. I'm not going to say the name of that person. This is not even a major league artist. She probably is, because this was like a well-publicized interview. I'd never heard of her, but very self-obsessed, right? And I'm not even going to give an example of this very typical artwork that she actually published, because then that would reveal the identity, and that's not who I wanted to. But my point is that up until now, the great artists have been super tortured. They have not been, they've been super tortured in all sorts of ways. For the first time, if you can actually build an art intelligence, and art intelligence does require you to, which is what we'll get to in a second, does require you to have an emotional intelligence, then you could build the best, like the most creative machine, but without having that those baggages that used to come with being the most creative, being the most artistic. So that would be something to behold. To give you a quick who's who of some great artists who are terrible people, like Caravaggio, obviously, he's actually, he murdered people. And again, this is one of the great artists of the Renaissance era, and this is, again, he's still held in a very high esteem, and for good reason. Then we got Pablo Picasso. Oh my gosh, okay, I mean, I got some Michelangelo, you got some, real Van Gogh. So again, lots of tortured minds over here. Another way to frame this is that up until now, for humanity to get the best art, you had to get it through the conduit of some really tortured souls. Think about that for a moment. So humanity has used these people, again, putting it in those terms, but you get my point. You kind of use these people as a conduit to get the best art that's elevated humanity. But now, for the first time, we could decouple the two, and we could get the best art. We could have our cake and eat it too. Think about that for a second. I mean, so ever since I had that realization yesterday, I was like, okay, so this could be something massive, right? This changes everything. Oh. So the next step would be fine-tuning the models. Then we've got some RL methods that we plan to use, some general adversarial networks that we plan to deploy, where we'll build one model. There'll be the discriminator model. They'll test and evaluate models. Again, these are technical details I wouldn't want to bore the listener with. in this conversation. It's meant to be a very high level conversation, but there are lots of different things that we want to be trying out. Another thing would be reward hacking, right? So we'd get a bunch of people together who got the most sophisticated taste, and then we'd do some RL. So again, lots of stuff that we want to try out. This is probably going to take like a year, so no point in talking about that right now. And the very next step is obviously doing fine tuning, but we compiled around 15,000 of the best arts. Like I had to go through like thousands. My gosh. Yeah, it was very boring work. This is data labeling work, the kind of work that Scale AI and other companies tend to offload to dirt cheap countries. I didn't have that luxury, so I had to do a lot of that grunt work myself. And some of the artworks, because the way I did that, I did offload some of that. I wasn't going to do all of that myself. Like that is absolutely soul-breaking work. Okay, it's not. You just have to look at some artworks. It's not like having to look at photos, right, and then saying if they are safe or if they are. It's not that kind of work. So I wouldn't want to paint that picture. But a lot of the artworks that I saw, like that have been on the National Gallery websites and Met and all of that, I was like, okay, like these don't seem super special. Like what am I missing? And that's the point, right? Even some of the best artworks, like they're not super impressive. And there are a lot of people for whom those artworks might work. But another realization, which is when you look at art for most people in most homes, it's abstract art. Do you know the reason for that? It's because it's very difficult for people to find the kind of art that would appeal for them, right? That would really resonate with them deeply.